Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where the orchard of wisdom shows are at your fingertips. It ignites your soul, your heart, your spirit, your mind, and your body with illumination from people who have made the journey before you. They're here now to help you on your journey, on your path of self-discovery. We are funded by you, the audience, and the people we interview. If you wish to support us, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com and press on our Fund Action button. Anything is appreciated. We'd like you to sit back and enjoy the shows. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Raising Our Gifted Children right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Patrice Badami. We're having to talk today about our special needs children and what educational needs they actually do need. Acorn to Tree, a place to learn and grow. Patrice is a special educational teacher and mother of three. She's advocated for families with children who have special needs to ensure that they receive special educational services that they require for them to be appropriately facilitated in their homes and school district. She created a website to help students as they navigate their way back to the in-person educational settings. And she is here today to talk about the special education, academic support, advocating for families with children who have special needs, having a child with Asperger's syndrome, having a child with central auditory process issues, as well as executive functioning issues, children with attention deficit disorder, dealing with a child who has neonatal intensive care concerns, and of new parents of premature children, and what they really do need in preparation of bringing home a baby. So there's so much we have to cover here today, so let's just get started. I think that we're seeing things like autism and Asperger's very much on the rise. But for me, I personally look at them as partners, our gifted children, because we expect them to come into our world and interact with us. If we went into their world, we would actually see how creative it really can be. But the educational system has really left a lot of children behind. And, you talk about like OCD. That is something that really, really can be very, very hard on teachers and on parents and on the child itself. So there has to be kind of a deep breath when we're looking at education right now and saying the system needs to change, doesn't it? Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Hi, thanks for having me. I think that everything you said is correct. One of the first things in reference to a child who has special needs, when parents or caregivers notice that the children are not reaching milestones, that's when we have the proverbial red flag. And having said that, I want you to picture like a fishing net where you can catch your child. Pardon me, sorry, excuse me. You can catch your child and you can help them with early intervention. Sorry, I'm having a little, excuse me.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry. All right, so they backtrack. So basically you have to picture using a fishing net to catch your child before they fall between the cracks by providing them with early intervention services. And early intervention services are often administered to children when parents have questions about the children meeting their developmental milestones, such as they're concerned with the child not rolling over, perhaps they're not able to sit up, they're not able to walk at a time that might make sense concerning what their pediatrician sees. That would be something where the child would require physical therapy. There's also speech therapy. Now, what's interesting about speech therapy is what falls under the umbrella of speech therapy is feeding issues. And that's something people don't know. That's a service that people are not familiar with, because when a child, in my case, I have a daughter who was born 30 weeks, and she's actually 5. She has a lisp, she has a tongue tie, but we just found out also she has a laxity in her lower jaw. So that's something that she needs, that's affecting her speech, not so much her eating. She does eat well, but she does have a weakness that if it's strengthened, she'll be able to form words, she'll be able to eat tougher foods. I've always been on the side of caution when it comes to feeding my children. I don't give them products that are hard to chew, just like a kind of a knee-jerk reaction since I have 3 children with special needs.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, so there's physical therapy for the upper body, gross motor, trunk control. There's the fine motor, which is the use of the hands. And if a child doesn't crawl, they don't develop that certain types of sensory response by having the hands pressing down on the floor. Also, that also affects their ability to have upper body strength, which trickles down into the inability to hold the pencil in a mature grip, which is developmental. For example, my daughter's 5, she's still holding quadruped, which means holding the 4 fingers like this instead of like this. So that's something that's what occupational therapy is. Physical therapy, speech, we discussed the eating, so you have to catch that quick. As soon as you find out that your child has weakness and maybe they're not able, they have the tongue thrust, which is when they're able to start taking in cereal. They're not able to, or they're showing a choking response. That's something you need to mention when you get the early intervention, and that's something that will be facilitated.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's issues with executive functioning, organizational, that type of thing, and then that could lead to, and if there's an ADD piece, there might be a central auditory processing. All right, so what's central auditory processing? Simply put, that's for if you're discussing something, if the child's sitting in class listening to a lecture and someone's tapping a pencil behind them, what's going to happen is they're not going to be able to isolate that sound. They're going to hear it as loud as the lecture, and it's going to inhibit them from really focusing. So it's not something where they're choosing not to focus. They don't have that developmental piece in place. So it's like they can't. For example, I was making a cheesecake the other day and someone was talking to me and I forgot to put sugar in.
Right.
So I know that sounds ridiculous, but truthfully,
distraction.
There you go. So having said that, so that's that could lead to an educational piece, which is the process. Doesn't mean they're not able to do it. It means they need to be facilitated in a manner to consider the central auditory. Now, okay, so that's what you can, how do you find out about these things? It depends on your school district, how they work. I've worked in different school districts. Some school districts take early intervention as a way of helping the child early on to prevent them from requiring much more services later. Essentially, you can overcome a lot in early intervention, more than you would imagine. So that said, I'm going to stay with the early intervention and tell you this. My son, who has Asperger's syndrome, ironically, I was in science publishing, and I was taking a book with autism. I was a copy editor for that. And that was 8 years before, but I remembered things. I don't know why it stayed with me. So when he was 18 months old, he was showing signs of being on the spectrum. He was showing sensory issues. He was showing perseverations. What are perseverations? Those are repetitious different behaviors that are soothing to that individual. For example, lining up toys. He used to do this, and he used to do this. And those are very common ways of coping. Pardon me. So what I did was I took those signs and I noticed he needed to wear certain clothing. That was the same. Sneakers, I bought the same pair. He was turning on and off light switches. And here's the piece that's really interesting. I don't know if everyone knows about this with children who are on the spectrum. He would overstuff his mouth because he wasn't able to determine that his mouth was full. So that's a very common. So he didn't choke, which is ironic. I don't know how that happened, but he didn't choke, but he did have a high threshold for pain as well.
Right.
So they process pain and sensory very different from us. So like, for example, whenever he got a shot, he didn't even flinch. And when one time he fell off the bed and his head was bleeding and he just stood up and started walking in. So you need to be extra careful when your child's diagnosed with being on the spectrum. Giving them a bath, for example. Be very careful with the temperature of the tub because they're not going to feel it the same way.
So that's not going to know whether it's too hot for them or not.
Exactly. So having said that, early intervention, it helped him to take these perseverations and behaviors and diminish them and then the actual perseverations they became extinct. So what they do is they use a tacting system for children on the spectrum, where what they do is they keep them very motivated. So they're given a tacting card, for example, which has a picture of something they want. Maybe it's a truck. And then they move towards that they break down something they want the child to learn, break it down into very digestible pieces, and they're moving towards this goal by getting a sticker. And then when they get that, they get rewarded. Now, there's also edibles. Edibles are something, it depends on the child, but you could, for example, give them something like crackers to work towards. It depends. Stickers work with some, crackers work for others. It depends on the child. You need to work through that. But when he finished working in the early intervention, he finished that program once he hit kindergarten, okay, because he did that for age 3 and 4. Once he went to kindergarten, all those behaviors were gone. The only thing that remained was his need for a little extra help, being facilitated, staying on task, and validating his need for help with the central auditory processing. So that's something that's very doable. You just put in place, you put in different mediums to help them through it. You're scaffolding, you're helping them, holding their hand through certain things to help them have the ability to do it on their own.
Right. So it's not a hopeless situation. It's a question of being, I mean, my son had speech problems when he was young, and it turned out, you know how the tongue is meant to kind of go to a point, and his tongue wasn't. So he literally had to kind of stroke his tongue and then go through various exercises to develop that muscle, right?
That's exactly what my daughter's doing now.
Right.
My 5-year-old. Yeah.
We as parents, though, unless the doctor is aware, or, you know, back then you could actually go off to a mother's clinic, you know, where your kids and other parents would talk about it, especially over the last couple of years. Access to other people or access to this awareness has kind of not really been very prevalent for people. So it's, for a lot of people, they rely on Google. You know, the various stages, they should be doing this by now, they should be doing that by now. And it's, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with your child. It just means that there is something wrong in the development of that child that needs help so they can be as fruitful as they're meant to be. And it's, a lot of people will maybe look at their children, oh my goodness, they're never going to have, you know, the advantages in life. Yes, if you hit it early enough and you help them manage it, cope with it, and be aware of it in their raising, helping them aware of their own limitations, or things that, you know, maybe like in the case of your son not being able to feel pain, is not putting himself in precarious situations, right? Or having buddies around him saying you're bleeding or you're hurt, you know. So it's a lot to put on a parent, but if we don't know, that's where the fear comes from, isn't it? When we know that there's a system and a process, then it's okay. It's less daunting. It's just now, okay, how do I apply this? What do I look for? How do I apply it? What do I do now?
Right. And what I want to share with you is my son, he's now 23. He graduated Dean's List from college. And a lot of people would be frightened if they see their child having the same perseverations, the classic, if you will, symptoms of autism, and to say that he just graduated and he's very independent. He actually helps with my daughter. So he's really great that way. What I want to say also is children on the spectrum, what's interesting, that term on the spectrum means, as you can imagine, there's a severe case of autism, then there's barely even noticeable, to the point where they actually reclassified him learning disabled. So they eliminated the autism piece. But what I want to tell you is Isabel Rappin out of Albert Einstein in the Bronx, which is where we went, she was one of the people who coined the phrases on the autism spectrum, and she is amazing. Now, she passed. However, her predecessors are carrying on her way of being able to help parents. She was wonderful, and she was recommended by my pediatrician back then, and that's another thing I wanted to touch on. Okay, so I'm going to use this term years ago. That's the term we use over here in New York. Years ago, pediatricians were very enthusiastic about jumping in and helping to point you specifically to people they knew. And that's when your pediatrician answered the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning. Nowadays, it's very different. Now it's almost like a cattle call per
Yes.
se, where children are in and out in 15 minutes. I've noticed personally that pediatricians aren't, when they're in a group and whatnot, they might be terrific in handling what's going on physically with your child at the moment. But when it comes to projecting, they don't really want to step out of that box. I don't know what the reasoning is, but you need to expect that. You need to say, I mean, I did get an audiologist recommendation, but when it came to this other information, because I went through it with my son, I already knew. I had a bag of tricks. I knew exactly what I needed to do concerning outside independent evaluations. So you need to educate yourself with tools, and podcasts like this are so helpful in being able to give you the information straightforward with nothing to gain, nothing to lose on the part of the podcasters. We just want to pass the information on to help ease your concern and suffering as far as, I understand what it feels like to be up at night. So frightened, what's going to happen to my child? And having said that, I also know another child who had similar perseverations, and he is currently going to SUNY Albany at the time, right now. So there's hope.
Oh, yes.
You just need to tap into resources.
Right.
So that's something I wanted to share with you.
Yeah. I mean, half the time we don't know what those resources are because, as you said, nobody talks about this. You know, it's, oh, your child is the autism spectrum. And then immediately that just becomes a label and kind of rather terrifying for a parent because they're not quite sure what does that mean. You know, they're going to learn differently. Are they going to socialize? Is there going to be temper tantrums? I've done quite a number of shows with parents of autistic children, as well as I've interviewed a number of autistic people who are highly successful, incredibly creative. But it is the not knowing what to look for. And then when you see it, not to get panicked by it. And where do you find the resources? And here in Canada, where we are right now on the island, we have 100,000 people waiting for a doctor that don't have a doctor, never mind getting to a pediatrician. Right. So it is such a shortage of that information right now. And they do turn to Google because, you know, all the information they think is up there, whether it's right or wrong, and it's having that right information. I have a 10.5-month-old grandson, and they're always kind of comparing, where's his development? He's not doing this yet. He's not doing that yet. Yeah, but he's doing that. You know, he's doing this, and he's very engaged. He just might be learning to walk, teeth catching, or that type of thing, made just because he's enjoying where he's at right now. It's not to panic, right? Right. It's, as you said, behaviors like hands behind the back, or, you know, the fingers moving like it's musical, and various other signs that are kind of out of the norm you would expect. You don't panic, just inquire, you know, start really doing your research instead of just Googling it, going to sites like yours where people can then really look at the information and get more education on it and know who to reach out to.
Right. I have some books here on the side. I'm going to send you some information if you want to add it to the podcast at some point. It's a list of resources and books that I found helpful. One of them is called 10 Things That Your Child with Autism Wants You to Know. And I found that to be one of the most helpful books because it lets you in on what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And also Temple Grandin, you know who she is. She's worked with, she's an animal behaviorist, and she's written books about her experience. She has many books. But what I want to talk to you about is also concerning children, just speaking with children with autism. What I want you to understand is you have to look at these behaviors as self-soothing.
Yeah.
You have to look at it like they're doing this because they're feeling something. They're feeling overwhelmed. That's why they're doing it. So if you understand why they're doing it, it's actually helping you out, and I'll tell you why. It's helping you so you're like, okay, I see starting to do the finger thing.
Right.
We need to get out of the park, get home, get some lunch. They give you clues because sometimes they're not able to express it. Right. So they give you clues as to when they've had enough. And that's something that if you know that information, then you can, that's what I used to do. For example, with my son, we would be out and I would see him start to do things like that. And I'd say, you know what, it's time to pull back. We were out at the park. We had lunch. Now it's starting to be too much. Let's go home. So you have time to stop that before it turns into a meltdown. Because when it becomes a meltdown, what it really is the child is overstimulated, their sensory overload. It's not that they're angry. It's not that, it could be that they're hungry, but it's not that they're angry, it's that their system has had it. So that's what you have to think of it. You have to think of it as it's a warning sign that you need to say, okay, he's trying to express to me that he needs to pull back. Now, another thing I wanted to share, just because we experienced it. For example, we went to Walt Disney World, okay, and that was at the height of him having these, different perseverations. Now, this is going back. Now, there's a lot of issues with COVID now, but if people are wanting to go, you can get a note from your doctor that says, my child, this child is on the autism spectrum, and you can work with your pediatrician as to how to word it, but you could get a special pass at Disney that allows you to go to the front of the line, because the child they start to get very upset with the crowds. They get in, they get on the ride, they get off, and they move on.
Right.
And you can do this. You are entitled to this. Your child is entitled to it. That's why there's all these different laws in place to help these children so that they can experience things that other children do, and in their own way. So that's something I wanted to tell you.
Pause you there for a moment, because I mean, in a way, you can look at it as a blessing, because you know exactly how much they can take, and you know what the warning signs are.
Exactly.
With other children, you don't. All of a sudden, they're having a temper tantrum, or they're crying, or they're this or that, and it's like they're oversaturated. You've pushed them too far, and they're maybe don't have to say, I've had enough now, can we go home? Instead it ends up being a temper tantrum or tears or something going on, where with the signs with a spectrum child, it is like, oh, the signal is there, pay attention to it,
exactly,
nip it in the bud before it gets out of sorts, right?
And so you take a family event and you take like a little nibble instead of a huge bite.
Right.
So instead of going to the park all day, you go to the park, you get to the park, you eat, you walk around a little bit, there starts to be a perseveration. You go, this is great, we're going to come back another day. You go, and then you validate that child, which is so important.
Yes.
And then you know what to do, and you have to do what works for your family.
That means
if you go to a party.
We have, very often two parents working, kids are in daycare, they maybe are not paying attention to the signs because they're simply not being around their child enough. And it's like, if somebody at the daycare is saying there's some issues here, don't dismiss it. Oh, he's just behaving badly or something like that. It is okay, then pay attention to your child. Our children don't have the language yet to explain. They don't know what's going on. And it's that the signs are there. No, your child isn't broken. Your child is just navigating life on a different level, a different frequency. And we need to understand what that is and honor that. Again, don't expect them to be like us. Why can't you be like us? No, they're different. Respect that. Come into their world, and they can play and succeed very, very well. Right.
And remember, typically developing children also have these signs. For example, my daughter, she's not on the spectrum, but she was a premature baby, and she has other things she's coping with. When she starts to get hungry, she starts getting a little bit crabby beforehand, and I'm like, oh, time to eat.
Right.
So another thing to do concerning that, just in general, I found I always have something to eat that's nutritious in my bag at all times, and water.
Right.
I don't care. Another thing is, when you go, for example, say your child's invited to a birthday party, you don't have to go the whole time.
Right.
You can go towards the end for the cake. Make sure your child eats a good meal. I always did that. Make sure they eat a good meal before they go to these events. Okay. Then you should go for the last 20 minutes. They're not going to know any different. They're just going to see the cake.
Yes.
So that's how you adjust. So you adjust based on what your child needs.
Right.
So they can partake.
And that means you've got to pay attention to your child. You've got to listen to your child in the way it's communicating with you. But that also means working with either the caregivers or working with the school. I mean, schools are behind in this way. Also, you've got the fact that there are so many kids to one teacher in a room. And I know in a lot of cutbacks in a lot of places, there are no more special need helpers there, which I think is so short-sighted. And it's very hard for a teacher to kind of navigate all of the children, never mind have now a child who's on the spectrum. So it's how can you empower the teachers to recognize the signs, to know what to do, to diffuse the situation that gives them power to be in control?
Well, I have an answer for that. having been a special ed teacher and still working in that capacity actually now, what is really important is, even though it might not make sense, when you get services, when you request services and you're able, based on your child's needs, you're able to get either a teacher assistant, okay, or have that child in a co-teaching model or an integrated classroom. I'll explain what these things are. An integrated classroom is you have children who have special needs in with typically developing children so that they can find a peer model, so they can learn the appropriate behaviors. It also teaches the typically developing children to have empathy and to understand differences. So it's actually mutually beneficial for both groups of children. A co-teaching, so that's in that type of classroom, you're generally going to have a special ed teacher and a typically developing teacher. That's what a integrated classroom is, and a co-teaching model is. Okay. Then you can have a self-contained classroom, which it depends. My son was in self-contained when he was younger, but then he moved over into a regular ed classroom, and he drove himself to college.
Right.
Drove himself, did his homework, never had to say anything. But what I was going to say is, when they have a self-contained classroom, they're getting that one-on-one attention in the beginning, which self-contained generally is one teacher to around 6. I think it's around, depends on the situation, but 4 to 6 students, depending on your child's development. And then they have teacher assistants also in there. Another thing is, you could be in a mainstream classroom and then have a teacher assistant that that as parents, you advocate for your child to get, and they're not hanging right on top of your child unless they need a constant redirection, which they might, and they do it gently. They're not gonna, have them singled out. They're gonna try to pull back as much as possible so the child can interact with the other children, but they're in the classroom and the only thing on their mind is that child.
Yes.
They're not there to go staple things or photocopy things for the teacher. That's not what they're there for your child, to support your child. They're standing close by, but allowing them to thrive and flourish. And when they need help, they redirect and they help them with whatever services you have for your child, which could be scribing, taking notes. It could be reteaching, depending on what that is. Generally, what happens is the teacher will create a broken down version of whatever the class lesson is, so that it's more digestible. And the teacher assistant or the one-on-one TA would take that and facilitate the child that way. They would possibly sit down with them. There's another piece where they get pulled out. So they get services pulled out for maybe OT, PT, speech, feeding. They are pulled out of the class and they get worked with one-on-one in that setting. And then with speech, with children with autism, it's a very good thing for them to have the one-on-one with the speech teacher, but it's also important to have a group. So they learn in a small group how to interact and get social skills. So
and their social skills are really, really important, aren't they? Because, my had a couple of kids with ADD, not the HD, but the ADD. And it is, my teacher, one of his teachers actually called it selective learning. Like when he wanted to learn something, he was all immersed in it. When he wasn't interested, he couldn't even hear it, and the hyperactivity would be there. He's gone on to, be a very successful businessman, own his own restaurant, doing very, very fine now. But for a long time, that attention span was just so difficult. You would give him a chore to do, and then you would ask him, have you done it? What? Completely over his head. If it's something he wanted to do, then know what it would be done perfectly. But it was always that challenge with that. But that's hard in the classroom as well. And that's also for some parents hard with, where especially if they have the hyperactivity as well, the ADHD, it's hard because the kid is overstimulated or is easily overstimulated. And it's like, how do you kind of turn their volume down? How do you calm them down? Because that's a different level altogether, isn't it?
Well, the other thing I was going to say is, yes, it is a different level. The co-teaching model is good for that, so that you're able, the special ed teacher is really focusing on her students, so she can help those students to redirect them and get the attention back to what they're doing, the focusing. There's also different types of, there's special devices. And when I say devices, that incorporates everything from headphones to help with the central auditory processing, but also chairs. There's special chairs that I'm thinking about getting one for my daughter.
Right.
So it has, I've seen it in other classes, other schools that I've worked at, and it's a type of chair where it moves. You're constantly moving to burn up that energy, but it's a legitimate chair for the class. They also have balls that they can sit on the ball. And another thing, when I was on Instagram, one of the moms showed me something. She puts these special stretch bands on the back of her chair, so when her kids are eating, they can move their feet and feel the stretchiness and get that sensory that they need while they still sit in the chair. So they don't need to get up and run around. They can bounce their ankles on this thing, and it's very soothing. So, and then there's the weighted blankets, which I actually just got one for my daughter. I got her a weighted pad. So when we're in bed at night, she gets the zoomies around 7 o'clock, which my dog and my daughter both get this around 7 o'clock. I don't know.
What are zoomies?
Zoomies
you mean zooming around. Okay, right.
Yeah, they just run around. So I put this on her last night, and it helped her to sit quietly and read. It's very comforting. The nervous system is very interesting. It's very interesting, and it's very complex. And so in order to physically soothe someone by putting a weighted blanket, it helps to bring their attention in, because you're soothing the muscles and the knees and the legs, and you're keeping them quiet by using a pad, but they get a good experience because it's a pressure on the legs.
Right.
So it feels good. So there's different things you can get. There's also cushions that move around on the chair. So if maybe a school doesn't have the money to get those special chairs, they can get these soft cushions where they can still kind of bounce a little bit, and it encourages them to stay seated. Right. So what you're doing is you're just giving them tools to help them stay in that classroom. And that's what you have to look at it as a tool. It's
right,
a tool
exactly.
child,
and it's trying to tell that
their needs are.
Yeah, telling that child to be still. Calm down, be still. No, it's like telling a tornado to stop. It can't do it. And it's like, as you said, by diverting that energy elsewhere. Now, of course, having a child with ADD or ADHD there, you wouldn't want to place that child near a child with the other spectrum, because they need peace and calm around them. So of course the positioning in the classroom or positioning in the family, if you have that, or your positioning around people, is something very important as well, right? Because you don't want to aggravate each other.
Yeah, so first of all, the first step is to determine, is this behavioral or is it an actual medical issue, which can be determined by two types of people. That would be a neuropsychologist who does a full-scale test on academic ability, and that'll determine where any type of disconnect is. I'm actually scheduling one for my daughter to happen in March. That'll determine, where is she academically, where is there a shutdown, where is there a missing piece, what do we do? And then a neurologist will be able to diagnose a child with ADHD, ADD. What helps them to determine that is when they give, here in New York, they call it a Connor's test. And a Connor's test is a test that's given, it's not a test, it's an evaluation, an assessment. You give one to the teacher and one to the parent. And then it asks you all these different behaviors that the child could be experiencing at home. And then you take these two, that usually the teacher will mail it directly to the neurologist, because they have certain laws and rules in the school. They can't give it to the parent. And then the parent gives it. So that's one picture to look at. You can have a note from the pediatrician, what they've observed, a note from the neuropsychologist. The neurologist takes all these evaluations, puts them together, and comes up with the diagnosis. He doesn't just diagnose looking at the child. They need to have all these other pieces in place. That's what an outside independent evaluation is. And those can be covered under your insurance, depending. You have to check, but it might not be. In my case, not covered. So I have to, take care of these things in order to facilitate. It's unfortunate in some cases, but in order to facilitate my daughter, I have to, have the expense of getting these independent evals. But ultimately, it'll help her get validated and get her services. Because when you go into a CSE, a Committee on Special Education meeting, you need to, here in New York, again, because I don't know what everyone else has, but you need to go in there with all your ducks in a line. And I mean that, because
Yes.
you might say, people, old school is, oh, the school district will take care of whatever my child needs. The reality is that's not always true. Unfortunately, sometimes you need to go in there and you need to be able to have your information in front of you. And if they try to, there's a lot of ways they try to disarm parents in these meetings. And we can go into that in a minute, but essentially you need to have these, the first step is get the classification, get the validation of what your child needs. Get the outside independent evals.
Because immediately they want to just put it as a behavioral issue rather than a medical issue. Yeah,
but that's so you get all these things so you can have the information. Having the information will give you the strength to go against the school district and stand up and get what you need. So that's something I wanted to make sure that people knew.
You know, I mean, as a parent, you're advocating for your kids anyway, you know, because we're custodians of our children. We're here to, you know, to help them on their journey of life to be the best they can be in whatever their chosen field is. But when you have a child that has challenges, whatever it may be, obviously, then that escalates quite considerably. And it's not just you, the parent, that's facing this with the child. The school system needs to be there. Families need to understand it. You know, you don't want grandma coming along and say, oh, they're just misbehaving. A good slap will do it, right?
Ooh, wow. Wow. Yeah, I guess.
You've got some old grandparents that think that will put it all in place, right? And it's like the education needs to trickle down to everybody you're coming into place with. And if you are going over to someone's house, you know, with your children, just to let you know, A, B, C, and D, right? And, you know, don't worry, I'm there. Or if the child is going without you, is to make sure that those things are in place, that they fully understand. And it's within your right to do so.
Exactly.
If other people are offended, that's their issue.
Exactly. The other thing I wanted to tell you is by saying to a child, stop fidgeting, sit still, listen, you're not focusing, you're hurting their self-esteem.
Yeah.
That child needs to feel loved, validated, secure. They need to feel safe in their home so that they can express whatever they have to express. Then the parents pick up that information and then they put it into place and make sure they get everything so that they have the support that they require in order to achieve in school. So the last thing you want to say is stop it, cut it out. Will you sit still, please? That's the last thing you have to, you can't do that. You have to say, all right, well, what do we need to do? Maybe we need to run around the house out a couple times and then you chase your child around the table, burn up that energy.
Yeah.
Usually if there's a situation with the child with ADHD, ADD, you have to look at what's going on. Okay, it's snowing out. All right, we're trapped in the house. What can we do? How can we? So then you play a game where you take all their stuffed animals, put them in a pile, they pick it up with their feet and they have to get it into the basket, a laundry basket behind them. You make them do you put tape on the floor, like painter's tape, have them run around the tape. You play games with them. You burn up that energy so that it helps them. It helps their system. So it's kind of like, if you could look at it like, maybe it's, I don't know, I can't explain it. Maybe it's like a bowl that has way too many marbles in it and the marbles are falling out. You want to just take out some of those marbles so that the jar is not going to tip over, something of that. I don't know if that's a good example, but having said all that, just you don't want to take away their self-esteem.
Spend their energy, spend it. Don't try it, because otherwise it's just going to erupt. Have they found a reason behind it, and have they found any way where they can actually help that child reduce that energy? Is there some neurological rewiring or something that can be done?
Honestly, my daughter has ADD. She actually has I think she has ADHD. My son, there's different things. Now, first, let's talk about ADD. ADD, my older two have.
Yes.
That's where they're sitting there and then they just kind of go.
Yes.
They're not able to, like, they
focus.
Can't focus. Well, and it's also the central auditory processing. But with my daughter, because she was born early, it's not uncommon for a child who's born. She's born 30 weeks.
Yes.
So they can't regulate that nervous system so easily. So if you could look at it this way, it's a neurological issue, not a behavioral issue.
Right.
It's the way they're programmed. In her case, what I do is my son is a martial artist and he does juggling and he burns up that energy.
Yeah.
And I have her in soccer twice a week and dance. So you take that energy and put it into something athletic and helpful. If you're trapped at home, literally do relay races, have a basket, put a bunch of stuffed animals. How fast can you do it?
Yeah.
Run back and forth. You can do it. I do it all the time because since COVID, we didn't have a chance.
Right,
a choice.
exactly. Yeah.
So bottom line is to reset, burn up to reset. That's my experience. You need to just, and if there's something they like to do, a particular game, let them pick. When they get in that type of a mood, they'll focus for something they want
Exactly.
to do.
Exactly. Then they're all focused completely. If they don't want to do it, then no. I mean, when my son was diagnosed, there was no information coming with it. It was just the label. And my daughter is OCD, obsessive compulsive, and peeling at the nails, the hands constantly moving. I mean, she's 39 now, extremely productive, but finds it so hard to unwind. And even in her sleep, she's like, what, get going. And it's like, never can calm down and she does yoga, she does everything, to try and get her to calm down. But her nervous system is constantly alert. But we just didn't have that kind of information then,
Right. Yeah, that's true. But what I was going to say is when you were mentioning the nails, that's very common for children who, she did not crawl. So she couldn't roll over till she was 17 months old.
Wow.
So she couldn't sit up on her own. And when they don't get that tummy time and the pressure, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. But when they don't get that pressure on the hands are so very sensitive. You'll notice that children who don't crawl, they have difficulty with writing. They have difficulty with dealing with their nails and the little pieces of skin on the nails that bothers her. Getting glue or paint on her hands bothers her. She immediately wants to wash her hands. These are all sensory issues. Also, even though she's 5, mouthing, not putting things like that are, for example, she'll chew on the tip of her doll sometimes.
Yeah.
She sometimes puts her hands around. That's another sensory issue. So when you have a sensory issue, it could be more things than you realize. And then once you understand more about sensory, you'll know that biting the nails, picking the nails, sticking things in the mouth, these are all things. And then having the hair brushed, being very, very sensitive to, getting the hair brushed. I mean, really sensitive to the point where I'm just putting ponytails in now.
Right.
I don't want to, you know what I mean? Yeah. So sensory is across the spectrum. So having ADHD, it's gonna they probably have some of these sensory issues as well.
Right.
So that
she has OCD, which they actually also thought a little HD as well. But definitely, I mean, she's not the compulsive where everything needs to be exactly in its order and you can't move it or anything like that. But she is compulsory on how things, and she's very short, extremely short. I've already said it once.
Right. Yeah. Right. I get that. I was going to say another thing that's important, I think, it's worked for me with all 3. I have a routine that they can count on. I have a routine that they find reassuring. I've never had a problem with any of these kids going to sleep in their own bed. That's me. Now, I'm not saying that other people that doing it, having a child go to sleep is not, if it works for them, that's perfect. For me, because I'm a single mom and I need to work, they understand that there's certain rules that they need to go in their own bed. And then I teach them to look at that bed as a soothing, wonderful, regenerative place and enjoy going to sleep. So I make it so I have all these crazy little things in her room that at night she has a butterfly lamp and a moon that turns color. And it's soothing for her so that I can sleep. And then she comes in the morning and we do the hot cuddles and things. But I make sure that she knows she comes home from school, she has her dinner. Then she has something else later. We have a certain schedule, and my son reacts very well to this as well. He likes that at 8 o'clock at night, she's in her bed, I'm in my room working on my computer, and he can do whatever he needs to do. He likes the calm and the peace. So having a schedule is very helpful. And for children on the spectrum, you can provide them with a picture schedule where it shows them so they can know what's going on today. It relieves some of that
anticipation or anxiety.
Concern, anxiety, you want to squash. Yeah, you want to squash the anxiety as soon as you can. So you give them a picture schedule, and that works with a lot of different children. It shows them, okay, this is done, we're doing this next, and it's very reassuring, and it creates a comfortable place. So that's something that's helpful.
There's a lot of kids today that are kind of brushed, with a diagnosis from somebody. As you said, they haven't done the full neurological thing, and it's like, well, you've just got this, or you've just got that, or you're just this, and immediately it's a label, and without kind of can make the kid and the parent feel, oh, what's wrong? What do we do wrong? Or there's something wrong with our child. And very often that isn't the case. The child is pretty, normal, no neurological problems whatsoever. It's just we're living in such a saturated time where there's just so much going on, and so many of the apparatuses and the phones and the computers, and so much stimuli, that I feel that it's been a detriment to our children. And it's certainly been a detriment to their process of imagination, of just being in the sense of play. And I think a lot of children may be kind of getting surface diagnosed, when really it's the system and it's the environment that is causing this, rather than a neurological problem that is causing it.
Yeah, that's screen time. So yeah, with screen time, there has to be
screen time, but just like so much noise and anger and everything else out there right now. These poor children are being bombarded all the time.
Yeah, that's just, there's a lot of things. There's excessive screen, digital, there's different types of electronics and whatnot. I put that all in. I put, like, as far as not the people, like the teachers that are overworked, that are overstressed, dealing with COVID, dealing with teaching from home, from school. My friend is a teacher, 33 years, who she found it very difficult to teach from home.
Yeah.
So, because she teaches an actual subject.
Yes.
With my situation, you're physically working with the child, but with her, she has to teach from home. So that's very difficult. So it's almost taking screen time, which is already oversaturated, and you're providing them with more screen time to do school. And I think this is what my feeling is on it. Now, again, it depends on the child, what age they are. But I was looking at whatever their assignments are online for a particular class. I look at it like, have the child just look and be respectful to the teacher, pay attention, look at them, but not expecting them to really absorb all the information. And I would go to the reteach them at home. Okay. And that's part of the reason I created that website, is because I have everything from pregnancy to high school, where it takes all the subjects, chemistry, physics, and it has information so that when your child turns off the turns off the computer, they're done with remote learning, they can rest, be at home, relax, eat, do whatever. And then when you need to reteach, it's right there. Everything's right there. It's all free stuff. So I wanted to make sure people had that. So when they need to reteach, for example, if you don't know algebra, which I'm not that great at algebra, you can go right online under math and you'll find all these resources to help reteach your child at home. Concerning the different, the oversaturation of all of this technology, there has to be limits on it. You have to look at a subject and come at it from another angle. For example, the anatomy, say a child's learning anatomy. Rather than just look at all the flat screens of get like a model, put it together, buy a model of the human body, put it together, say, oh, what's this? Discuss it. When you're teaching them alphabet, rather than show them flashcards, have them draw an A in rice.
Yes.
Sand, rice. So it's a tactile thing. Try to teach your child, reteach them at home in a way that's fun, and it's allowing them to express themselves with and deal with their sensory issues. Yeah. So teach them differently. You can, that's what I think is important, using Play-Doh, all these different things. And it's not just for younger. You can, into elementary, you can use these different things with Play-Doh and whatnot and teach them. So you have to not eliminate completely, but reduce the screen time. And when they do remote learning, pull them away from that and do something they enjoy, so that they're not overwhelmed. Let them relax, take a bath with some, different things that I'm talking about the children with autism. Let them have their sensory time. Let them run around outside or inside, and you have to diffuse, pull away from it, and let them understand that it's not how it's always going to be. It's not always going to be like that.
Right. Yeah, and
you
you know,
know,
I've had a couple of educators on recently, you know, where they're feeling like uh, you know, political correctness is kind of tied their hands in the sharing of books and stories and things like this, because there isn't enough reading going on. And, you know, my little grandson, I think, has been read to since the day he was born. And
yeah.
you know, he's been read to all the time. She sent me a picture the other day of him just looking at a book himself, you know, with a book and making, I mean, you know, the story time that you can read to them, making it exciting and making it a part of it, but that love of books, because I think it's a quiet time. It's a time where their imagination is ignited. You know, they can become the hero of the book, but it's also keeping not only books alive, but the wonderment of what books can do for us as we grow up into adulthood. And I think it's kind of scary that everything becomes online and not the tactile of actually holding a book and you know, losing yourself in the book. And very often, as I said, two parents working, come home, cook dinner, maybe there's a sporting event, now everybody bath time, bedtime, and there isn't that book time. And I think somewhere along the line, it's a calming type thing, isn't it, to kind of
Yes,
bring everybody
yes.
down. This is the quiet time. We're going to do a story and then it's quietly into bed, and can make it a part of that routine that they look forward to. They look forward to the calming down of the book and the story time before they go to bed.
Yeah, you know what I do is I have this thing I call it bed top when we do it in the bed. I do a tabletop at the table, or floor top we call it, which is silly, but that's a time when we sit quietly. We either play games, physical games, not digital games. We play blocks or whatever it is, or we write it. We do writing, or you know what's a really terrific thing that is great for children are conversational cards. Cards that, what would you like to do when you get older? If you were a vegetable, what type of vegetable would you be? I like to do things like that in addition to reading books, so that she knows we're going to do something fun in the bed. It's not like flashcards are great, but I like to do cards or read books to her where she can answer questions and ask questions.
Yes.
And I like doing, she loves it. And that's where we take this thing. So if there's an issue with a child going to sleep and decompressing, again, get the weight. You don't have to get the weighted blanket now. Those are kind of overwhelming. They're a little bit heavy. Get the weighted lap pad. They also have weighted little dogs and little teddy bears and things, and they can put that on their lap, get the sensory experience while having something to cuddle, and it goes to bed with them. Right. But that's a time for quiet. Now, there's also something we do here where I live. We had 1,000 books before kindergarten. It's a program at the library where they get stickers and little things every time they read 100 books, and they can color in. For example, the first one I think is Blue Jays. So we colored all the Blue Jays every time we read. And then there was an award ceremony at the library where she actually stood up and received this little award after reading. So there's a lot of libraries are doing that. Good. To bring back the reading, and get them a little tote bag, so that on every Friday you go to the library, you get like 6 or 7 books, and you have them read. So if they get involved, to get their own library card, then it'll be more fun for them if they get involved in some of the library programs. It's
the same thing as, like, very often when they've read a book that's excited them, they'll want to draw it. You know, or the person that's really stimulated them. I'm this person or this person, and then it, you know, translates. But it also is telling you, you know, what excites them, and you can use that in that conversation. You know, if you were so and so, what would you do? And it's not only the gift of switching on that imagination and having them think forward, but also I think there's something that's being lost quite considerably with our younger generation is the art of conversation. Because, you know, it's emoji talk, it's short abbreviation talk, and it's done in little clips instead of a sentence. So I think, again, if we can engage our children to talk about the book, to talk about what they've just seen, to talk about something, it's that permission to be heard and seen, right? Yes. And that their opinion counts, you know, building up their self-esteem, allowing them, you know, we always had a round table. And that the dinners were always about what happened in your day, and we would talk about it, you know. And you get that first question, Mom, what's a homosexual? Okay, what age are they? How are you going to answer that, right? But always answer it truthfully, even if certain things need to be diluted. And it's Don't shy away from things, because that makes them feel they don't have permission. And
Right,
so
right.
it's that, I think, is essential in building up their own self-worth and their own self-esteem, and also that curiosity, because we see so much today in adults that have just simply lost the curiosity of life. And it's sad to see. So we need to ignite that in our
Right.
children. And as I said, I've interviewed quite a number of people, different spectrums of autism, highly creative, wonderful conversationists, but that's because their parents invested in them. And very often a single mum, most of the time a single mum. And they went through everything. They were actually told to institutional their child, and they go, no, I am not doing that. And they went through everything they went through, and very often they didn't have the resources, but they have now become the resources like you have.
Right, right. For my son, for example, that's funny that you say that, is he graduated with a graphic design degree, but he also has his own YouTube channel where he teaches harmonica lessons. And he's got 300 followers so far. So,
right.
I mean, so there's always that creative piece. He also juggles really well. So yeah, I mean, basically the bottom line is converse with your child, look them in the eye, discuss with them. And another thing, I just said, look them in the eye. I should actually correct that statement. When you want your child's attention and they're on the spectrum, sometimes it's actually sensory-wise, it's almost painful for them to look directly into your eyes.
Oh, really?
So what you can say is, yeah, it actually, some children get very upset by that. So what you do is you say, oh, could you see, look at my nose here. And then they do it. They'll look at your nose, but they'll at least face you so that they're able to process better. But you don't say, look me in the eye. That's
I didn't know that. So that could be,
can be upsetting.
It could set them off. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. But the other thing you were discussing about conversation is, if say you're at home and you just don't have any books available right there, you just don't. Talking to your child and creating a story with them in it. And just,
I used to do that all the time with my kids.
So that's the bottom line, is just talk to them. Tell them about when you were little and you made this ice cream with your mom and what you used to do. They want to hear it. They want to know, and they really want to know when they were born, and you tell them what happened, how nervous you were. Just talk to them about them. If you don't have access to the books right away or something, that's another thing. Just teaching them how to discuss.
I mean, like, you're going on a car ride. It's an hour long. How do you keep them calm for an hour? We used to play the I Spy, I spy something, and then people will be looking at the far horizon, and and that could be exciting. That we would sing, and everybody would sing along with them, or we would, do you remember when? And it's not just kind of assume that. One thing I always found it very hard in driving is with the kids screaming. That's one thing I had a taboo on. I'm driving, I'm concentrating, I don't need kids screaming. So it's like how to divert that attention into something. So if you are going to go on a long ride, it is, make it fun, have the skills, the tools, or whatever you need in order to do that, right?
Right. I mean, even old school, the car bingo, where you slide the little door over if you see a truck.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Sign. It's actually like a cardboard thing. It's from like the 70s or something, but it's called car bingo. And you just slide over, you see a truck, you see a red car, and then you see who can get, and you don't need any chips or anything because it has a door. Or you can get a pack of, there's so many different conversational cards out there, different types. There's grandparent chat, there's what would you do? There's all different, I have a bunch of them. So yeah, those are also, and it's very easy. It's in your purse. You just grab a card, you read it to them. So that's just a great thing as well to have. I hate to tell it, but like when it comes to the screaming in the car, sometimes it is difficult for a child with autism or special needs. And honestly, my daughter, there's been moments, and I say to her, listen, I'll tell you the truth. Mommy needs to really focus because we want to get there. Yeah. So you just can't scream. You got to just bring it in. I can't. Lucky for me, she usually falls asleep 5 minutes in.
That's good.
I don't know what else to tell you. She does. But when you can stop the car and discuss, not yell, just say, listen, honestly, I can't concentrate. Mommy has a hard time concentrating too. And if you keep doing that, we're literally not going to get there on time because I missed the exit already. Yeah. That's happened to me. That's happened to me. So, yeah. So you talk to them, And then, validate what's bothering them. Sometimes they'll
Right.
tell you what's bothering them, and you're able to go from there.
And sometimes they don't know what's bothering them. They're just having a day.
Right. Yeah,
And you know what?
exactly.
You're having a bad day. Okay, you're having a bad day. Let's growl at the bad day, and then
Right.
honor the fact that we all have bad days. Why do we try and hide and go, no, everything is all right? It's okay. You're having a bad day. Let's acknowledge that. Now, how do we make it better? Right. And all they need is that acknowledgement that they're having a bad day, and they want to feel better. So now you've acknowledged it and you can help them feel better, because we all want that. And I think it's a skill that we could teach them very early, no matter what. It's how to handle our sadness, our anger. There was that wonderful movie, Inside Out.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, I love that movie.
That was wonderful. All about all the emotions. Terrific. They're all there for a reason. The thing is, don't get stuck in emotion, right? Spend the emotion, don't get stuck in the emotion. And yes, it was a wonderful movie then. Then they did Soul after that, which was also another lovely movie.
Oh, yes. That was another one.
And the thing is, there's so many wonderful movies out there that are really can be as tools, because they're so wonderfully educational, inspirational, and they kind of can bring the whole family together and and bridge that gap. So use it not only as an entertainment package, but as a tool.
Yeah, definitely. One thing we didn't talk about concerning children on the spectrum, I wanted to mention, it's a comorbidity, which is something that goes along with the behavioral issues and the sensory issues, is digestive issues. That's very common. Children have very sensitive stomachs and digestive systems. I'm not saying don't eat this type of food or don't eat this type of food, because I actually had my son, him tested for weight and all the different things. There was nothing.
Yeah.
But you just have to be aware that it's not uncommon for a child with digestive issues, as a child, perhaps constipation or diarrhea, that it can turn into reflux later. So they'll end up having sensitivities. That's very common. You'll find, if you do research on that children with autism do have difficulty with digestion.
Yeah.
So,
well, my daughter with the OCD has had that all her life. So it's interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So that's something, because I've experienced that with him and with other children I've taught, that it's not just an issue of, first of all, they have to be tested for food sensitivities, not just, well, I'm just going to eliminate this randomly. You need to get them tested for certain things so that you'll have the information. But sometimes they won't show a sensitivity at one point, but later on they might have an issue. Like we have both reflux. All three of us have reflux. So we have to be careful and eliminate certain foods, and essentially it's making us eat more vegetables to help with the reflux. So that's very common to be aware of, to get some information, to get an assessment from a gastroenterologist if your child with autism or on the spectrum is experiencing digestive difficulty. That's something to get some information on.
Well, what we're finding right now, again, I've done many shows on, is digestive issues as a whole amongst adults. As one of my wonderful hosts for 5 years said that your kidney, colon, and your liver are the most important organs, because if they're not working properly, nothing else is going to work properly. And our digestive system very often can be in turmoil, because when people are anxious or angry or upset, it immediately upsets the stomach and the digestive system, creating more acidity in the body. So I suppose that could also be in correlation with the spectrum, if they're getting upset or if they're getting out of sorts, of that digestion being affected.
Well, I'll tell you this, there is definitely a gut-brain connection. So it's not uncommon for a child who is experiencing digestive issues that we mentioned, and also to have migraine headaches.
Yes.
Because it's like your body is fighting. Your body's, I got to get rid of this. This is not working for me. Whatever you ate is just not getting it done. Something's happening. So that's something that really needs to be understood and analyzed, is the gut brain. If you notice that your child has a headache, and then a couple hours later, an hour later, they have an issue, then you see there's a reaction. It's just something you need to educate yourself about, and seeing like a qualified nutritionist concerning that, and working with your GI doctor. That's a good idea. It's a very good idea, because if you have a migraine, are you in a good mood?
Yeah.
It's also, it could be very emotionally upsetting, but just painful.
Yes,
terribly
exactly.
painful.
Yeah, they've actually have found that people who go to more a vegetarian or vegan diet helps the digestive system and numerous other systems as well. And, you know, we've also got to bear in mind all the chemicalization that is put in our food today. And, you know, a lot of, oh, no, the chemicals are just their preservatives and this, that. No, our bodies, you know, are saturated with them. And so therefore the bodies are going to react to them, and it's going to cause some dis-ease and disease in our bodies. So, you know, as pure as we can, as organic as we can, you know, as natural as we can with the foods, it also helps because, again, digestion, organ system is healthy. It helps everything else. The brain work better, everything else work better. So
yeah, I agree with you when it concerning the organic, and then add a lot of vegetables. My kids always ate a lot of vegetables. The baby, she's been eating vegetables since she was little. She always has spinach in her food. She always has broccoli or something green on it. She knows that. She even said to me, I can't have that until I have my vegetables. I'm like, that's right. And another thing, when it comes to feeding any child in general, but children who have special needs, and you're noticing they're gravitating towards one type of food, what I do is I break the meal down, and she eats the protein first. She has that on a plate. She finishes that, then she has the vegetable. Then she has maybe the macaroni or maybe the French fry, and I give limited amounts of that so that the protein is what's going to keep them full, just like with adults.
Yeah.
So you get that in whatever source you're using, whether it's yogurt or whatever you're feeding them, and then you move on to the vegetable. And then, so if you get them into that soon, like early on, she asks for tomatoes and peppers with her lunch. I mean, so that's what I mean. If they get used to it from an early age, knowing that it's required that you eat these, then that'll help with their system and prevent the gut-brain conflict with problematic foods.
Right, exactly. And, you know, they don't know it outwardly that these foods are better for them and they feel better for them, right? They just know, I like these foods because they don't know they actually feel better on them.
Right, exactly.
I feel good, but I'm not associating it with the food. It's just, I like the food. It makes me feel good, you know, right?
That's absolutely true. And there's a terrific farm. Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's a great, if you get them used to it. And if you have the ability to visit a farm with your children, that's also great. It'll get them involved. There's a farm right next door to me, so that she gets involved with planting the carrots and then harvesting the carrot. And also I get her into cooking. I got her these special knives. They're for little kids, and she cut up the celery. She cut up the carrots, and I watched her, and she was eating it. And I was like, oh, that's great. So when you get them involved with the cooking, then they tend to eat it.
Yeah, there's also another aspect of that, which I think all children should be a part of, appreciation. Right? Appreciation for where the food comes from, appreciation who sells the food, appreciation for who's preparing the food, cooking the food, eating it, and that if they understand all of that, that it's not grown in the supermarket, right? You know, then there is an appreciation and a better digestion for that food. So, yeah.
Right. We were watching a movie yesterday. It was all about a farmer and how he gets up so early in the morning. And I go, look at this, that he's getting up and it's dark out and whatever it is. So we were watching that. Yeah, I was actually really into it. She's like, okay, that's enough. And I said, okay. But it was very interesting to look at that, to see where does this come from, you know? So, you know, that's something important concerning nutrition.
Yeah, and it stays in their mind. They may look like they, flippant, but it stays in the mind. And you know that when they turn around and tell someone else. You know, so you know that it's been part of it, but it's like, give everybody a chore at the table. Who's setting the table? Who's clearing the table? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And it's that participation, because it gives them a sense that they're contributing, right? And that we're all in this. We've all participated here, and again, that appreciation. So it's no matter what challenges our children may have. And we've given them a lot. We've given them a lot of abilities to grow even brighter and bigger than we have. But at the same time, we're also oversaturating them, and we need to, you know, bring down some good old, beautiful, simple way of living, you know, going, playing in the mud, you know, going, playing in the puddles, you know, going, chasing the worm, you know, it's back to the basics there. But our children are incredibly resilient. And really what they just need is to know that you are hearing them, you are seeing them, and that if they do have a challenge, that doesn't mean you're broken. That just means you have to do things differently. And it's okay to tell
Right.
someone, I can't do it that way. I can do it this way. Right. And to
Mhm.
stand up for themselves. And as I said, kids are incredibly resilient. So if we can teach that resilience, they'll do well through life.
Yeah, and if you're able to learn early on, get them in early intervention, that will help guide you. And not only that, the important thing is you're not just giving them the help early on to help some of those perseverations diminish. You're also starting the process of getting your child in the special education system,
Yes.
so that later, when you want to get more services, you have to show them, oh, we already gave them early intervention, so you know there's an issue there.
Yeah.
So that's a stepping stone, but you need to get the outside independent evals, because some school districts are going to fight you.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they will fight you is they'll say to you, oh, your child's just so wonderful,
Yeah.
and just so sweet and and they'll come up with ways of, if you will,
Of
buttering
avoiding.
you up,
Mhm.
to direct you away from the needs.
Right.
So when you go to these special ed meetings, another thing that people don't realize that's very helpful, bring a picture of your child in a frame, put it right there, so that this is a child.
Association.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the child that that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then it makes it more real to them.
Yeah.
And you come in prepared with when you get these evaluations, usually a neurologist, once they have everything, they're not just going to read everything and validate with a classification.
Right.
They're going to come up with a list of objectives and goals so they can create an independent education plan, which is called an IEP, or a 504, which is also it gives services at the district level within the building. So it's a little bit different, but it's still getting services. And these things, a 504 and an IEP, that follows them for the rest of their lives. What does that mean? That means after your child's done with elementary school, it follows them to high school.
Yeah.
When they're done with high school, it follows them to college.
Mm-hmm.
That they'll get time and a half on assignments,
Yeah.
that they'll get separate location. Okay, and then they want to go for their PhD when they're 34, guess what? It goes with them. And if they are not adhered to in this school, if these different goals and objectives from the IEP are not validated and fulfilled at the school level, they are breaking, that's a legal document.
Right, exactly.
Which will give you more fuel for the next DSE meeting. Okay, you didn't do this, so now we need this, this, and this. And unfortunately, if you need to, you should do research in your area, get the name of a special education lawyer, and say, we could always go to due process.
Right.
I actually had to do that one time. All I said was, oh, no, that's okay. If you don't need, here's what I would like you to do. Since you didn't facilitate my child and adhere to any of these goals, I'd like him to go to this special ed school that I found, which will validate him, give him the support he needs. All you need to do is just give me the paperwork and make sure that he goes to this school, and I want it in my mailbox. But if you're not able to do that, we can always go to due process.
Right.
I got the papers the next day in the mailbox.
Exactly. They don't want to do due process. But there's another huge advantage of all of this. As we look back at your son and all the system and how it's helped him to be a very productive, functioning, happily adult. And let's face it, society right now is so dysfunctioning on many levels without any other issues, right? Just as a society. What it does is when people look back and say, well, does it really work? Yes. Look at the kids that had come before. The more success rate they see there, the more they know that they need to integrate it to have the success rate. And that really, it's not that big a deal to do because the system works.
Right. The last thing I'd like to leave you with is this. So having an IEP does more than provide them with services as they're obtaining this educational goal that they have. It also will help them to get, if they don't want to go to college, or if they have gone to college and they're concerned about entering the workforce, they could go. Now, for us here in New York, we have a government-funded program called Access VR. Through Access VR, there are companies in the area that want to work with Access VR and provide students who are on the spectrum, who have special needs, with job experience.
Mm.
And because they have the IEP, and because these companies want to work with these government agencies, because frankly, it looks good on their record
Right.
to have children with these certain issues working for them, they're going to treat those children well.
Yes.
They're not just going to go out, get a job at some coffee shop or maybe at a store at the mall where they're treated not necessarily well.
No.
With these government agencies in place, they will make sure, because because these different companies, they have someone who they're accountable for. If they need to work with Access VR, for example, to make sure your child is treated well, learns skills on the job, and has the ability to get a position at some of these companies afterwards, once the internship is finished. They also can help them get driving lessons.
Mm-hmm.
They will help them create resumes. They will help them apply for jobs. It's another way of providing support to these children after high school, after college. So that's something that you're entitled to, you pay taxes for, and this is something that's available. You just need to find out in your area. And there's different, for example, Autism Speaks might be a place that you could reach out to. It's not something you would reach out through the school district. It's what you would look up through different organizations that help children with disabilities. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit outside of that. They kind of work parallel,
right,
but separate. So what they try to do, or they attempt to do, is to give your child services, but they're going to take it to the next level. They're going to help your child learn how to use a bank, open a bank account. They're going to help them with job skills. So that's something that, don't think it's over once they finish college. You can get the support, keep that IEP in place. Classification is not what it was in the 70s, where it's a stigma. Classification is a support system. It's helping your child to gain access to different situations that will guide them, and help them in life to become citizens within, the society. Right. That's what it's going to do. So be aware that having that classification is going to help you.
Right. And, you'll probably find an awful lot of these companies will employ them afterwards, because they can see the quality of work. Okay, maybe you have to approach differently, or, allow for this or that. But at the same time, they see that when they're in focus, and, how creative they can really be and how good they really are. And it's like, oh, no, we're going to keep them. Right. So, or refer them to another company if they can't hire them themselves, because they see the beneficial there. And it's, as I said, there's one autistic child. She's got her graphic design degree as well. Right. She's on her third book of fantasy books, and she does all the drawings, and she's created this whole story, and she's in the process with her third book. And she's a little bit kind of quieter and has a smaller section of people, section of environment, but highly creative. So it's, I would love to see, the diagnosis isn't to label the child. It is to understand that this is the child's challenge, and these are things that you need to put into place, so this child has the best aid possible to help it navigate through life, right? And it's not to label the child, and then that's that label, that stigma, that judgment that's there. No, you can put all of that away and throw it in the garbage. It is about to actually understand how you can behave behind them, what is expected of you, right? It's all this expectation that everybody must behave the way I want them to. No, that actually is a lesson, I think, for many, many people, to treat each other differently and better by not having everybody to be exactly the same. Right?
Right. And the other thing to keep in mind is but now with everything going on with COVID, there are jobs from home. I mean, these agencies can help your child get trained, for example, in Adobe Cloud or Canva, which is another graphic design tool. They can teach them or get them these different programs so that it's at a reduced cost, or there's a program that they can actually maybe learn online based on their needs, and they can become certified, and they can do graphic design from home if that's more comforting. It's so doable. Literally, just wrote a book myself in the last like 3 weeks. I wrote a book that I'm going to be selling online, and it's about birds, but that's something else. But my point is that your child can learn some of these different skills so they can work from home. They can be in their own home and get an actual job.
Yeah.
And they can build up their resume that way with, like, for example, Upwork, Free Up. These are some terrific mediums to work from home if they want, if that's more comfortable for them.
Right. And there are many, there's one guy at the beginning of COVID that started an entire organization of teaching people how to code. And it was a totally free platform of teaching people how to do coding.
Right. Yep,
because so
true.
many people are now looking, for that. It's become a really, a job that's very much needing to be filled. And, a lot of these people can't afford to go to school or this or that. So he started a whole organization that taught them how to code and then helped them get the jobs. So there are people who recognize the value in people and understand there are obstacles in their way. If we provide the services needed, they're going to not only have a better chance at life or their own productivity, their own self-respect, their own self-esteem, their own self-sustainability. It is actually better for the community, is better for society as a whole. Right.
And they can learn something like all different things. They can do coding, they can do graphic design, they can do editing, copy editing. There's so many things.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Rather than to apply right after college, go directly to Upwork, Indeed, one of these other things, you go to one of these facilities, they'll help you get your resume in place so that you can upload it.
Right.
They'll help you get the training in Adobe or Canva or whatever it is. So yeah, that's something, because they would be considered a student at that point.
Yeah,
and they can get a reduced rate.
Yeah.
So that's like another thing to keep in mind.
Out of necessity comes solutions.
Right.
And I think the reason why people go through their particular challenges in life, no matter what it is because that has become their instrument to play. That is now going to be a solution to someone else, right? So, a lot of people go, why me? Well, why not? It's you going through the process, going through the struggle, learning all that you need to learn, and now being able to pass that knowledge on to other people is your gift, is your meaningful purpose, and it's certainly become yours. So you have this wonderful site, Auditory,
Auditory.com.
Right. Yep. I know it's under construction at the present moment. It's going to be back up again soon.
Yeah, it should be up. I'll definitely shoot you an email and let you know when it's going to be. Right now, we're looking probably at March. That's probably we're pretty much almost towards the end of it, getting it all situated. But that's what we'll have. It'll have, again, resources for families from pregnancy all the way up to high school. Everything from exercise for kids, writing, reading, all different things. And it's also going to have the educational toy review. I only review toys that have purpose, that have a valid reason why they can help a child.
Right.
I also review children's books that I think are wonderful, and then adult reference books and adult toys and products that adults can provide their child with. For example, there's one thing that I have. We just put in the car. It's for the feet. It helps. A lot of times, children with sensory issues, they can't stand the feeling of their legs hanging in the car seat. So it's actually a footrest. It's a footrest. So it also, the feet won't fall asleep. So that's that's a type of product. So I would have the product reviews, and we're going to have in the kitchen where they formed a tree, where we teach families how to take stuff right out of their pantry, cook up something nutritious, from 1 minute to the next, having something nutritious. My sister's a chef, and she graduated in culinary art school. So she's going to be doing that piece for us. But I wanted to provide a one-stop shopping where it has everything, all the different academics, and then just information. We're going to have the podcasts, and I'm hoping it'll be helpful to people.
Wonderful. Great. And very necessary. I did a show just a couple of weeks ago on, an emergency, like if your child is choking or, CPR or anything like that, and that it's so very different with, young babies. And we know toddlers, everything in the mouth, and it's or if they fall down, how to recognize concussion and all of that, the emergency side of things. And then half the time, while I'm talking to him, is I've thank God, got 3 healthy children in their 30s, but I didn't know about this when they were babies. And the thing, having these resources, there's some signs here, the hands and the this and that. Or does this mean something? Having those resources, reading something, having an avenue to go, even going to your doctor and knowing what to say to get a reference to the specialist, right? To get a reference to the neurologist, knowing what to say and just saying, well, I think my child might be special needs. Well, what do you mean? Going in there and being specific on this action, that action, or this development or that development. You know, you are giving yourself the fuel and the power for the doctor to have to follow through instead of dismissing it. So the more you know, the more empowered you are, the more you can help your child, and the more you can get the right resources.
Right. And I think what's, for me, the route that has been successful for me is I notice issues that are, you know, a problem developmentally wise, that they're not reaching milestones. I go to the pediatrician, get their information, and from there I gather all of this evaluations. Then I approach the school district. Then I say I want to set up a CSE meeting. I don't go directly to them. I just sent papers to them for 2 evaluations I had, and I told them I'm going to have a 3rd, so that they know I mean business, and that I want to be prepared to have the CSE meeting. So you don't just go directly to the school district. That doesn't always work.
No.
You need to have something done. You need to have the background done first.
Yes.
That'll help you be taken more seriously, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that means
that's how it has to go. And it also helps to validate exactly where you're going.
Right.
So
you know,
it's
just make sure that your doctor, your pediatrician hears you.
Yes.
You're with the child pretty well 24/7. You're seeing these things. Now, I know there are going to be some people who are going to get, you know, immediately see a child putting hand behind the head and immediately think something else. No, you've got to look at some repetitiveness, you know, some definite development issues. Don't just think because the kid hasn't reached the goal by 1, that therefore there's something wrong. It might reach it by 13 months, but there are other particular signs, and let's get educated as to what those signs could be. And then see them being repetitive, because now you know there's definitely some indication there, right?
Right. Yeah. So they're not going to get a classification for necessarily for being on the spectrum until generally 18 months or so, because that's when the perseverations really start to become noticeable and repetitious. Here, I believe it was 2 years old is the general when they start with the early intervention. I got him in 18 months only because I was aware of it, because I edited a book on autism.
Right.
So that's the only reason he got in there early. So usually it's 2. It begins usually around 2. It goes into when they're about to go into kindergarten. So like through preschool, they get the early intervention and they get the services generally. And then you just, you know, maintain it and keep getting updates.
A question: if a child, they kind of quote missed the boat of catching it early, and maybe only seeing it at the age of 5 or 6, when really it kind of starts, the teacher starts giving feedback. Do all these systems in place help a child that is already at that age?
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because although my daughter got early intervention, at the end, when early intervention finished, and her IEP, you know, that was completed, I had her evaluated again. She was only able to get here OT. Boom, COVID hit.
Right.
So she got nothing from COVID being hit till now, the last, I'll say 3 weeks. And that's me paying outside, you know, I'm paying privately. Right. Because I'm not gonna, because they will do the CSE meeting next May. I'm not going to wait until May. So what you just said applied to me, because I actually put her back in preschool this year. She normally would have gone to kindergarten, but she didn't know her letters.
Yes. She
didn't know the numbers. She didn't meet the certain things that she's going to need. And her teacher actually said she would have been lost in the sauce.
Yes.
If you put her in kindergarten this year. So I pulled her back, and she's enjoying it. She doesn't know any better. It's not going to make a difference later on.
No.
So if you feel like, oh, you know what? I'm concerned with this whole COVID thing. My child's not getting what they need. Pull them back 1 more year. It's not going to make a difference. It'll increase their self-esteem. Yes. It'll give you another year to work with them at home. And so she actually fell into that category. So now we have to go back, because she only was at the time, she was only allowed to get the OT. She doesn't get anything here. If she doesn't have 2 service requirements in our school district, she gets nothing.
Wow.
So now we were getting her evaluated for the speech and the OT. She has been validated, but we're also going to get the neuropsych to find out if there's any specifically validating ADHD, which I think she has.
Right.
So then we're going to go back in and we're going to try again. So that's what happens.
Yep. Be persistent, parents. Don't give up.
Exactly.
Don't get pushed around. Be insistent.
Mhm.
And as you said, know a lawyer in your area. Make contact with them and say, I hope I never need your services.
Exactly.
But if I
Exactly.
do, this is who I am and this is what I'm up against. And you never know, that lawyer may just turn around and say, go this avenue. You'll have more success,
Exactly.
right? So don't be afraid to fight for your child.
Mhm.
Never apologize, right? Don't come aggressive. We don't want you to be aggressive, but we do want you to stand up for your child.
Right.
Because the more help they get as early as possible, the better chance they have of actually having a really wonderful, productive life. And quite honestly, folks, all you have to do is just look on the news today and see how many people out there who apparently have got everything together that aren't leading a productive life. And so the greatest gift you can give any of your children on any level is that self-value, that no matter what, I mean, I have dyslexia. I was only diagnosed at 21. I went through school just not being able to do certain things and just really kind of being called stupid, right? So, and I didn't know about learning disabilities. I was a very sickly child, missed a lot of schools. So we just put it down to that. And so it was, she's a slow learner, she'll never get it, or this or that. And I didn't know I had dyslexia, or maybe some other things due to my illness. So it is, let's be kind. Let's be kind. Just because somebody is not functioning at your level or isn't getting all A's doesn't mean they're stupid or they're incapable. It just means that they maybe need a little more help, a little more understanding, a little more encouragement, and one hell of a lot more compassion, folks, which I think we could give to every single one of us, everybody. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like one last note is, she's correct. You are correct when you say, Sarah, that you should not be aggressive.
Yeah.
I didn't, when I was in that meeting, I simply said, okay, well, you didn't adhere to this. I said it very softly, like that. You didn't adhere to it. That's an actual legal document. So I have this particular agency. They're available to me. If we need to go to due process, we can, or you can give me the papers that are required for this child, my child, to be bused over to this special ed school in the next couple of days.
Right.
So I got it. There was nothing else said, and I got it. That was it.
Yeah. So I mean, we can be extremely forceful with a very quiet tone.
Exactly.
Right?
If you have the information behind you, that speaks for you.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes the softly spoken with the right words, with the right action, will get more attention than somebody coming and ranting and raving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's 100% correct.
Right. And, your child doesn't want to see that. They don't want to, to see you. You may have frustrations. You may get upset with the behavior of your child because, yes, it can be tiring, especially with, the ADHD. They're always on the go. You might not have the same energy. Yes, it can be exasperating. This is why you need your village. This is why you need either the family or the friends or somebody else where you can just call up and say, I'm at my limit. I need help. And somebody to come over and let you go and have a bubble bath or just go for a run or do something, right? Just to decompress. Don't be afraid to ask for help, please.
Yeah, because you'll become more refreshed and you'll be able to come at the situation from another angle.
Yes.
And you can always, what we do here is we have a stop sign. It's like Velcro. I have 3 faces, a happy face for green. I have a neutral face for yellow. And then I have a sad face for red. So she sees that if I put it in yellow, I go, okay, we're starting to have an issue. Do you want to go back to green or do you want to go down to red? Where do you want to go? Then I have a jar with butterflies that are sparkly. So if she does well, she moves past the behavior, she puts a sparkly butterfly in the jar. But if the behavior starts to go into a tantrum, which it can go, she has to take one out. So she can see and make her own choice.
Yes.
And what you can do is you can mark a jar with a picture of like a horse, saying you're going to go visit horses or something of that nature, go for a walk, so that they're working towards a goal and they're choosing. Sometimes they can just choose and they can see it in a 3-dimensional way. That's another way to squash behaviors.
Right.
But you do need to take time for yourself.
It's empowering them to have a choice. Right? We're telling them, don't just give in to those tantrums because you have this. It's saying to them, you have control over this. Be aware of it. Know how to nip this in the bud. You're giving them the skills and the tools that they can take throughout their life. So you are empowering them to do this.
Right. That's true. So it's like giving them the cause and effect, teaches them cause and effect as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's worked here, and we're going to continue using it until she's
Yes.
older. Hopefully not till she's 18, but we'll see how that goes.
You're right. Well, if it's working, it's and also very often, the child will turn around and show you when they don't need that anymore. Or I've got it, mom, and
Yeah,
it's,
exactly.
or you're a reminder that they may need to go back to that practice again,
Yep.
but the thing is, the earlier you integrate these skills and tools and choice accountability in a child, the more tools you're giving them in their backpack to navigate through life. So it's really important. So the site is
acorn2tree.com, acorn to tree learn and grow. But you search it for acorn2tree.com.
and it will be back up again
Should be in
towards the end
March.
of in March. Okay.
Yeah, should be in March.
And if
I'll
people
send
want
you
to
the
reach out
information.
to you in the meantime to have a conversation, I know you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you've got a YouTube channel as well.
Right.
So people can always reach you there. Or do you have a Facebook where people are sharing information?
I think they could reach out to me on probably Instagram's the best way, because for right now that's where I have all these different things on there, and that's the easiest way. I have to upload my videos to YouTube. I didn't do it yet. Trying to do that this week, but I think that's probably the best way to reach me. I'm trying to redirect my Facebook page. I'm trying to figure that out a little bit, but the Instagram's up and going. Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay, great. And what would your URL be for Instagram? What's your handle?
It should be under Patrice Badami. So that
Can you spell
Patrice
that for
Badami.
the people who are listening,
Sure,
please?
Sure. It's Patrice, Patrice, and the last name Badami, and you could also search Acorn to Tree.
Okay, wonderful. And for LinkedIn, you're under your name. Facebook, you're also under your name.
Yes.
Twitter, you're under Acorn to Tree.
Yes.
And then your YouTube channel, I do have the link
Acorn
for
to Tree.
Acorn to Tree as well.
Right.
So it's just your Instagram is under your personal name.
Right.
Wonderful. Right. I'm going to leave your link there up on the show and just tell people to come and visit it for when it's up and ready to go. We need this information. The more we know, the more empowered we are, the easier it is to manage something, the more you empower and the more you stabilize.
Right, right, definitely.
Right. So it's you might be something that you see somebody and you don't feel afraid to say to someone, have you noticed your child is doing this or your child is doing that? Don't say, well, I think it's autism. Just say, perhaps maybe you just need to talk to someone about it, because a parent sometimes could be so engrossed in they don't know. Or have you seen this resource? Have you gone to that site? Just you might find it interesting, because no parent wants to feel they're doing something wrong or haven't observed anything. But just saying, there's great tips over here, great knowledge over there. Just check it out, because we all need resources. And we want to know we can do it without losing face, right?
Right. And on this site, I have a section of resources that's called Autism, and then there's another one that's special education. So that's on the site as well. But I'm going to be sending you an email that has a whole bunch of resources on it, some books and different things on there, so that you can have that to put on your podcast, I guess.
Yeah, you'll put it on your show page for sure, so people can do that. So,
excellent.
And for people who may listen to the show down the road, all you have to do is go to selfdiscoverymedia.com and put in your name, Patrice Badami, and all of her information will be on there as well. So please, somebody who needs it, or maybe you need it, and sometimes looking at the information and being aware, because it also affects your behavior around people. Right? It doesn't mean you don't have to have a child with it or know someone with a child, but you're going to come across people who are challenged with this, and it's up to you how you behave around them. So the more you know, okay, this person's on the spectrum, or this person has OCD, or this person has HDAD. It doesn't go when they're adults. You know it when they're adults as well. It just helps you to know how to navigate around them. Again, stop expecting everyone to come into your arena. Sometimes you've got to step into other people's arenas in order to communicate.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful knowledge with us here today.
I'm happy to do so.
and mindful of wonderful knowledge. I know the show's going to get shared a lot, so thank you so much.
I'm glad. All right. If you ever need any other information about other types of children, we can
Yes,
always do another podcast. Definitely.
absolutely, absolutely. I wouldn't even mind doing a round table with someone else, and and just the more information we get
that'd
out
be
there, the
great.
better. That will be great. So folks,
Right.
she's going to be back again. I will let you know when.
Okay.
Until next time, folks. Bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. Please tune in to our selfdiscoverymedia.com/shows, and you will see all the other genres that we have from you. Every week on Tuesday, we bring you new shows from illuminating people. If you know someone that should be interviewed, please contact us at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com. Now stay tuned for your next show.